The Three Kingdoms period in China saw warlords, governors and tyrants battling each other and forming alliances and then stabbing each other's backs to ascend to a title of Emperor of China and forge a new dynasty to control the country's future with. However, what about the people, the common folk, the peasantry, those people who tilled your crops, crafted your armour and brought revenue to your commanderies? What's in it for them? What if they stood up for themselves? What if they turned against the warlords and rebelled, donning turbans that were yellow? Well, thanks to the Yellow Turban Rebellion DLC, you can lead the peasantry out of oppression and into enlightenment and challenge the tyrant Dong Zhuo and the warlords to become the new emperor who will bring about the Great Peace. However, how does this culture pack measure out? Is it fun? Does it live up to expectations or deliver an interesting new approach to the campaign? Well, we will cover this in this review of the Yellow Turban DLC today. And if you haven't bought it yet, hopefully this will help you in your decision making process, or if you have played it too, then maybe this will sync up with your thoughts or challenge your beliefs, or hey, just be entertaining. So without further ado, let us sprout ever upwards towards heaven. So those of you who have been following Creative Assembly's social media feeds in a run up to both Total War 3 Kingdoms coming out and the upcoming 8 Princes DLC, you may have heard about the different approaches to DLC content being taken by CA. During the time of 3 Kingdoms, we will see culture packs, which are much like the culture packs you got with Rome 2 and Attila, chapter packs, which are big shakeups of the starting situation and factions on the campaign map, and at some point we might see a full fat expansion pack. The Yellow Turban Rebellion is classed as a culture pack, which adds a new faction group to the main campaign, which is further divided into 3 new factions to play as. Each of the individual factions have their own traits and features, but share the same overall goals, unit roster and government. Let's quickly look at the 3 factions you get now and the overall traits of the Yellow Turban Rebellion. When the Yellow Turban Rebellion originally flared up before the murder of the 10 eunuchs and Dong Zhuo's raising of Liuang, the Yellow Turbans were led by Zhang Zhu, who was the General of Heaven, and his 2 brothers Zhang Bao and Zhang Liang, who were the Generals of Earth and of the People. However, their initial rebellion was stopped by the Han Empire, and subsequent cleanup operations were authorized to flush out the last few rebels. However, now that the veil of chaos has shrouded China once more, new Generals of Heaven, Earth, and of the People have risen up to the mantle once more. Marking himself out as the leader of the people is He Yi. He Yi has a focus on population growth and fielding large armies at a faster pace than his fellow leaders. He Yi's dominion grants a considerable boost to replenishment, which allows wounded armies to get back in the field faster and also maintain a swift pace when going on the offensive. Plus, the more population a commandery has, the cheaper it becomes to recruit new troops, which is very useful given the very expensive recruitment costs of your more advanced units. He Yi's faction also gains a unique building chain which boosts population growth while also increasing public order, which is great for offsetting the usual public order penalty which comes with having a high population. You can also gain a special option when capturing enemy territories, which is to heal the wounded, which aids in the recovery of the population and of your commercial income. All 3 factions also gain early access to one of the advanced units in the roster. In He Yi's case, the early access unit is Yusha, who are heavily armoured swordsmen who can use guerrilla deployment, allowing them to spawn outside the usual deployment zone. He Yi has the worst starting situation out of all 3 lords, however. Even though the game may say he has the easiest starting situation, you will find yourself surrounded by factions who hate you, and it won't be long until Liu Biao, who claims to be a pacifist governor through his lying teeth, will drop kick you out of a campaign map. Huang Xiao's focus is on research and technology, which is more vital than you may think for the Yellow Turbans, as a lot of key infrastructure buildings and the vast majority of their units are unlocked via research. Huang Xiao's dominion allows characters and generals to earn experience at an enhanced rate, which is even more valuable than XP gathering boosts for vanilla characters, as the unlockable skills for rebel officers are really unique and can also provide faction-wide boosts without the character needing to hold a high-ranking office. The Dominion in Heaven also grants an increase to your research rate, which is good in the early game, but it's pretty easy as the other 2 factions to quickly boost your research rate sky high too, so this isn't a huge draw in my opinion. Huang Xiao also gains early access to archery masters who are capable of dealing out suppressing fire damage, though compared to the other archery units available to the Yellow Turbans, they sadly lack in the melee department. However, they may save your life in Huang Shao's starting situation, which, while made up of 3 regions, the Yellow River will cut through the middle of your dominion, and it leaves one of your territories at the mercy of Yuan the vassal king Xiao, and Kong Rong will probably clown on you a bit, but hey, if you live long enough you can potentially link up with He Yi in the south. Huang Shao also has a unique building chain which will further boost your research rate, and it'll also increase the satisfaction of your characters, which is super duper useful in the early campaign especially. You also gain access to unique assignments for your scholars to seek out talented new characters to join your faction, which can be a lifesaver in the late game. Gong Du is the general of the land, the lad I spent most of my campaign time with since he has the best starting situation, or at least the most survivable starting situation, despite having Dongshuo as your next door neighbour. However, West China is easy pickings for an early expansion, and you also have your back to the edge of a campaign map, which means one less direction for you to get dunked on from. Gongdu's dominion of the land and focus on logistics grants increased movement range for armies and a boost to your post-battle loot as well, which works very well with his unique building chain, which grants even more post-battle loot and increased military supplies to keep your armies campaigning in hostile lands for longer. If you do find yourself needing even more military supplies though, Gongdu has you covered with his unique army stance. The Liberate stance results in your army encouraging oppressed peasants to revolt, which cuts the food production of the region in half and also lowers public order by a huge amount. This is a really cool stance, but one complaint I have about this stance is once you lower the public order enough to the point of a Yellow Turban army spawning to challenge ownership of a commandery, it becomes automatically hostile to you, and there doesn't really seem to be any way of turning this army to your side, which seems really counterproductive. Gongdu also gains early access to Guardians of the Land, who are ex-palace guards who have joined the rebellion. Guardians of the Land are the only Yellow Turban units who use G-pole arms, and sadly these guardsmen have unlearned how to make spear walls, making them slightly less effective than their Imperial counterparts. However, they are still a good defensive unit thanks to their heavy armour. Overall, these are 3 fun factions with varying focuses and starting situations. If you're still new to Total War 3 Kingdoms, I personally recommend Gongdu as your first playthrough of a Yellow Turban faction due to his rather isolated starting position and ability to quickly raise funds through looting. If you want a survivalist challenge though, He Yi makes for an exciting early game as he is surrounded on all sides by foes, and somewhere in the middle sits Huang Shao. Anyway, that's our 3 lovely leaders covered. Let's have a look at the campaign gameplay now of the Yellow Turbans, and then we'll move on to a battlefield map. So how do these fine folk play on the campaign map? How do they compete with the warlords who have the backing of the nobility in the armies of China? How does one start as an insurgency, then grow into a rebellion, and then into a legitimately recognised domain? Well, firstly, you won't be advancing through the ranking chain like the vanilla factions go from noble to marquis to duke to emperor. Instead, you'll be climbing the ranking chain of enlightenment, to go from a devoted follower of the Great Peace to being healed to empowered and then enlightened, and ultimately becoming the Yellow Sky Emperor. However, like the governor factions, you cannot independently found an emperorcy, and once you reach the rank of empowered, the 3 Kingdoms event will auto-trigger if it has not been done so already, and the 3 strongest hand factions will declare themselves as emperor. At that point, it is up to you to capture all 3 seats and prove your mandate of heaven by capturing 90 regions on the campaign map. So yes, this does mean in fact it is the same victory conditions as it is for the vanilla factions. There are some key differences in the ranking tree, however. Instead of earning prestige through conquest and upgrading your territories, you must accumulate enlightenment, which is much easier to obtain than prestige. You can earn enlightenment for doing just about anything from constructing certain buildings to researching any technology, and even just through assigning new skills to your characters. I really do like the enlightenment currency system as it fits with the goals of the Yellow Turbans, as they study more Taoist scriptures and aim to improve themselves as people and the welfare of the peasantry. I do draw an issue with the overall victory condition of becoming emperor, however, as it just plays out the same way as all the other vanilla factions in the late game, and at that point I just felt like I'd lost my identity a bit, as I was no longer rebelling against something, I was just another warlord fighting to secure my grasp on China. I mean, I don't know, man. I just wish there was an alternate victory condition rather than one fixed end goal or a more unique victory condition for the Yellow Turbans, or maybe a stronger story as it goes on, a dilemma between becoming another warlord or staying true to your ideals instead of just the same progression system using a slightly different skin. Technology and upgrades also come in a different style for the Yellow Turbans. Instead of the reform tree, you'll be going back to the traditional Total War method of research, which is selecting a technology to study, waiting a few turns, which is factored mainly by your faction's research rate, and voila, your new technology is in effect. It does change how you plan out your development of your faction, since you won't be unlocking your reforms in such a clockwork manner as the reform tree. But the more free-flowing structure of the Yellow Turban tech tree as well allows you to quickly pursue certain tactics such as unlocking your better units earlier in the campaign, or targeting technologies to boost the satisfaction of your characters or unlock more assignments, and save gold on army upkeep, salaries, and preventing corruption. I really love the way the Yellow Turban tech tree is also portrayed graphically with the 3 tower scrolls of heaven, people, and land, with each of these books benefiting one of your character classes in particular. The tech tree is also where you unlock your top 3 government positions, and a quick look at the government shows that while you can unlock plenty of administrators for your commanderies, there isn't a lot of upper management. But hey, the movement isn't about establishing a new bureaucracy which would wither, corrupt, and fall into decadence like the Han administration. And quite interestingly, certain positions will only take certain character classes, and again, I like that. It's pretty cool. I do wish I could choose my faction heir though, which you can't do as Yellow Turbans for some reason, which means I couldn't gatekeep the most important position in my faction, annoyingly, as I didn't want someone with negative traits wandering in there. Moving on to your characters, these are both the biggest strength and the biggest weakness of the Yellow Turbans in my opinion. Now, you don't have the 5 usual suspects serving your core this time, but instead you'll have 3 unique classes: scholars, veterans, and healers. All of them have access to unique assignments and skills, but they also focus on 2 of the 5 available ratings your characters earn. Scholars focus on authority and expertise, healers on resolve and instinct, and veterans on cunning and resolve. Much like their vanilla counterparts, these characters have access to their own recruitment pools, with both your generic units and your specialised units, which you unlock through research. Scholars can unlock a variety of specialised infantry units, healers are the only characters who will be able to recruit trebuchets, and they also provide your frontline troops, and veterans will provide your spear units and several hardy archer units. Veterans also provide your heavy cavalry and your ranged cavalry. All 3 of these character types also have access to some truly devastating battlefield abilities, and some may learn how to regenerate their health while on the battlefield. They can all hold their own on the battlefield too as fighters, and they can prove themselves as strong duelists. However, characters can also be your biggest weakness when playing as a Yellow Turban faction, as we often join your faction with very low levels of satisfaction, which can become a big headache unless you can give them some fancy ancillaries, as you can't pattern them off with meaningless promotions this time since they are not officers. They are your students, and they only increase in rank and salary should they be in good stead with a faction leader, which, yes, does remove a quick fix, which I borderline abused when playing as Cao Cao, but it makes sense for this mechanic not to be available to the Yellow Turbans, as these characters are here to help, and they're not really in it for their own agenda. But sadly, there is the ginormous kick in the shins in the late game in regards to your characters, in that if the other 2 major Yellow Turban factions do get wiped out, which is a pretty likely event as everyone hates them with a burning passion, you will no longer have a pool of candidates to hire from, which means losing a general on the field will now become a critical error, whereas as the vanilla factions can usually just quickly replace their officers from their large talent pool, but you may find yourself having to disband armies. You'll still earn new officers from Man of the Hour events for after battles, which luckily happen very frequently for the Yellow Turban factions. However, once Old Age starts cleaning out your court in the mid to late game, well, let's just say it leaves you praying for an emergent Yellow Turban faction to appear and survive for more than 5 minutes, so you can quickly mooch some fresh officers off them. I don't necessarily want to make this one of my complaints, by the way, as I really tried to embrace this challenge, but I was frustrated by the lack of candidates in the late game, as it really did cripple me at that point. In terms of domestic life, the Yellow Turban building tree is much more streamlined than vanilla building trees. Yellow Turban buildings are capable of doing a little bit of everything from generating raw income to boosting certain income types, and it really makes planning your economy a snap, and thanks to their low unit maintenance costs, which can be further reduced through reforms, they can become an economic juggernaut in the mid to late game. Diplomatically, the Yellow Turbans are not in for a good time though. I've said a few times across the course of this review, but when you are playing as a Yellow Turban faction, everyone hates you. Well, everybody except the other Yellow Turban factions hate you, as you have an automatic -40 penalty for cultural differences with the Han factions. And Liu Biao seems to have an almost psychotic hatred for Yellow Turbans, and was my ending when playing as He Yi. and the biggest thorn in my side when playing as Gongdu. You cannot make alliances with non-Yellow Turban factions as well until you attain a rank of Enlightened, and actually building off of that, a lot of your diplomatic options towards the Han factions are locked off from the beginning of the campaign. This means you'll find yourself in a somewhat disadvantaged position in negotiations, and it will be a major part of shaping your early strategy, especially since you cannot negotiate peace treaties until you reach the rank of Healed, which encourages you to try and maintain the number of enemies you make and aggressive campaigns to undertake, since you cannot fob one enemy off of a quick peace treaty to cover your back for a few turns. I really did like the challenge of having to earn my diplomatic options through growing my movement and becoming more and more enlightened and recognised. However, it did come with some challenges, but I welcomed them with open arms. But it did come back with one annoying drawback, which I really do hope was just a one-off glitch for me, but the outcome was an effective diplomatic castration and another faction to effectively win the campaign. This glitch was that I could not exit military alliances because my faction rank was not high enough to do so, despite the fact my faction rank was actually high enough to form and join military alliances with other factions, which is pretty redundant and pretty annoying. The Yellow Turbans are also annoyingly incapable of espionage as well, which is a massive shame because I really love the spying system in Three Kingdoms, and I really think even a limited espionage capability would have really enhanced the strategy of the campaign. I'm not wanting to infiltrate the enemy core and constantly just trash talk characters so they'll just leave a faction out of dissatisfaction, but a way of infiltrating key cities and spreading the inevitable rebellion beyond your borders against the warlords would have been great. Say a system similar to the Skaven Undercities in Total War Warhammer 2. Overall, I really did like the Yellow Turban campaign gameplay, but I think just summing up my complaints or my criticisms that we've said, they're really fun in the early game, but it just peters out in the late game, unfortunately. Now, this is where the good stuff is for this culture pack. The Yellow Turbans have a much more unique roster than the vanilla Han roster, which really mixes up battles and strategies. Since the Han factions usually rely on units such as Pearl Dragons or Xi'an Sword Guards as the front line, plenty of Spear Guard on the flanks, and some crossbows and saber cavalry. But the Yellow Turbans have plenty more unorthodox units to draw upon. That being said, infantry is a strong point of the Yellow Turban factions, with a selection of specialist damage dealers and support units, average spear units for absorbing cavalry charges, and a nice variety of archers who are pretty handy in a melee fight too. Yellow Turban units also demonstrate a lot more resilience on the battlefield than Han units do as well, thanks to their massive dedication to the Yellow Turban cause. Some key units in the Yellow Turban roster which really stood out to me personally as well were the People's Warband, which were a lightly armoured unit who dual wield swords. Fantastic damage dealers if you can keep them out of range of enemy archers. Horseback Huntsmen are your only ranged cavalry unit, however since you can access these guys very early on in the campaign, it does give you a big early game advantage, especially if you can get them equipped with fire arrows. Men of the Forest are also a great ambushing unit who are capable of sending volleys of arrows out with great swiftness and devastation, and they are very skilled with their axes in close quarters combat too. And the Yellow Sky Heralds may have a bit of a discipline issue, but these guys just simply do not give up, and they will keep fighting to the very end, making them a fantastic unit for pinning enemy units while you regroup your armies if things aren't going your way. Overall, the roster is absolutely brilliant. And again, I like the character-centric recruitment options, as it makes organising your armies a very interesting challenge. In terms of weaknesses, however, I will say the Yellow Turbans definitely do lack in the cavalry department. Yellow Turban horsemen are okay, but virtuous noblemen are simply not worth their extreme price tag. And White Wave cavalry are your only shock cavalry, and while they're okay and do come with guerrilla deployment, they're no Jade Dragons, sadly. You'll also get access to these really cool units in your garrisons too, making garrison battles in your resource settlements much more viable and are no longer just an instant write-off defeat. I found myself winning the majority of my garrison battles actually with this one without the help of one of my main armies, which is just absolutely insane because I was losing those suckers a lot when playing as Cao Cao. Another useful feature for the Yellow Turbans as well is the ability to recruit captain retinues to help them out. These are retinues led by a captain and come in 3 flavours of warrior, archer and spearman. Warrior captains bring some Yellow Turban warriors and spearmen to boost your infantry capacity. Archer captains bring several Yellow Turban archers and some men of the forest for ranged and stealth capacity. And the spearman captain should just be avoided. He'll bring some Yellow Turban spears, but he also brings peasant band and peasant spearmen, who are pretty useless and very expendable units. Just go with a warriors captain, you'll thank me later. Captains are really great if initially expensive at the beginning of a campaign, but if you need to raise a simple army quickly or if you've run into a character shortage, they really will save your life in a pinch. And they do get cheaper as the campaign goes on. Just do keep in mind, however, they can't outright command armies and you can't customise their retinues either. The abilities used by generals can also just be considered straight up OP, with some of the blistering status effects they can inflict, with the knowledge of a mind ability being a particular standout to me, since it just nukes enemy morale and is usually a turning point in the battle once someone pops that ability. Just keep in mind though that the cooldowns on the abilities used by Yellow Turban generals are much longer than the cooldowns for abilities used by vanilla generals. So timing is everything. Overall though, the armies of the Yellow Turbans are an absolute blast on the battlefield, and I had a lot of fun trying to unlearn and rethink my standard strategies I had built up in my Cao Cao campaign of having a front line of Azure Dragons while shock cavalry went in for the quick flank and smash, since the lack of good shock cavalry and a heavier focus on infantry and specialist infantry meant getting more creative with my army builds and how I deployed my troops, and using those damage dealers to strike at the perfect moment for maximum carnage. But to bring this review to a close, ultimately, I think the Yellow Turban Rebellion is a pretty solid culture pack despite some weaknesses, or the late game campaign sort of petering out and the whole slight crisis of losing your identity a bit, unless that is just me. But for the price of £7, you're getting a new cultural group to players in the campaign, which offers 3 unique and very challenging starting locations with 3 quite different play styles, and also just a completely unique new unit roster. Combining this is going to give you up to and beyond 100 more hours of playtime with Total War 3 Kingdoms. Yes, I would have rather seen some different victory conditions or a better espionage system, but this time my praise outweighs the criticisms by far, and despite hitting my stalemate in my campaign personally, I'm ready and I'm very eager to give it another shot. So, I say go for it. You can wait for it to go on sale if you would rather, but I believe even at full price, it is a good deal, and I highly recommend it if you're beginning to run out of traction in the vanilla game and you fancy a real challenge. Thank you so much if you've made it to the end of this review. It does mean a lot to me. I know this one was quite long, but there was quite a lot I wanted to talk about with this particular DLC. But like I said, it is really fun, and if you want to see my review of the upcoming 8 Princes DLC, why not subscribe? It'll be out in a few weeks. See you later, my friends.